excited to be here to do
My name
this.
is Laura Foster.
Guitar player extraordinaire slash resident fun guy at Northside Baptist
Trio Quinn. I'm actually Charlie's cousin.
Neil Baker. Eddie.
Baines Blanton. I'm a junior at Lowndes High
Drew
School.
Peterson. I'm a student at Lowndes High School.
All right, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today. If you just introduce yourself and we'll just keep on going.
Okay, I'm Austin Gregory. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So if you could go into a little bit of your testimony, and then we'll just keep on going with questions.
Okay. Grew up in church growing up at Southside Baptist. Parents were heavily involved. Named after a pastor, Pastor Austin Deloach, and my boss now, Joey Tomlinson. They had a huge impact on my dad's life, bringing him to Jesus, and so my dad's natural response was, we're going to name him after those two guys. And just grew up heavily involved in church, but I feel like a lot of church kids, if you grow up as involved as I did, you see way too much stuff that you probably shouldn't have seen. And so I got to sit in meetings that a 10-year-old shouldn't have been in, and I got to see a lot of the ugly parts of the church, and it kind of gave me
a mixed view on...
Yeah, just seeing a lot of hypocrisy. I always was kind of an odd kid, and so I'd bring odd kids with me to church, and seeing how people in the church responded to those kids. I grew a bad taste in my mouth towards church people, and then because the common thing was these church people would get up on the stage and be like, God is the reason for everything in my life, and he's like, don't give anybody credit but God for what he's done in my life. Well, then I was like, okay, well, your life sucks, and I'm blaming God for that. Like, you're a terrible person, and apparently you want to give God the credit for that.
Yeah.
And that gave me getting a bad taste in my mouth. But then God put a solid, good Christian in my life named Kobe Tomlinson, and he was my youth pastor, and I wasn't even in youth at the time. He just started. Kobe, I had walked to the back of the youth room to get my little brother, because he's always banging on the drums back there. He shouldn't be. And I was going to get him. Kobe stopped me. He's like, hey, you want to go get Subway sometime? I was like, sure. I'm in middle school. I ain't got nothing to do. I'm
hanging out with the youth pastor.
Yeah, I was like, I don't care. If you're going to buy, let's go. And that led to years of me eating lunch with him, getting coffee with him, going to his house after school, and him just pouring into me, and seeing how Jesus lived in his life. It was such a radical difference than the people in my church. The people in my church, I was just like, man, y'all are hypocrites.
Yeah.
And they're all got suits and ties, traditional church. And then Kobe comes in, and he's got tattoos all over him. He's a skater. He was in a punk rock band at one point. And I was like, but he looks the most like Jesus in his character than anybody else. On the outside, you're like, is he? But when you get to know him, he loves his wife more than anybody. He loved his kids. He was so personal with people and with the students. And seeing Jesus show up in his life, and then to my there's the Sunday morning where I finally, God had been working on me with Kobe, but then there's still my struggle with depression going on at the time, and doubts, and it kind of came to fruition at this one Sunday morning. Get up, go to church. My parents forced us to go to church, so there wasn't an option. But I kind of made this deal with God. I was like, if you don't change something, if you don't show up today, I'm done with this. Yeah. I have to still come, but I'll be done in my heart and mind. And I sat through that Sunday school class, and nothing happened. I was like, you're running out of time, dude. And then it came time for the Sunday service, and there's these big pews, and I sat on one end, and my parents sat on the very far other end.
Wow, yeah.
And I was just in my own world, and I didn't pay attention to, I think Jeff was the worship leader at the time, Jeff Lay. I didn't listen to any of those songs. And then it was Austin. He started preaching, and I was not paying attention at all. but I was like having this internal conversation with God, and questioning like whether God exists and all that stuff, because I'm like, I don't see it in people's lives. Like I see it in Kobe, so like give you a little credit, but
everybody else I'm around though.
Yeah. And it was like God told me to look at the end of the pew, look at my dad, and if that's not enough proof, I don't know what is. Mm-hmm. And my dad, he's a recovering addict, and so like I grew up with him going to rehab and stuff like that, and the man he was when I was born is so far from the man he is today that like my wife, she only knows this guy now, like post Jesus, and like 20 years of being a Christian, she gets to see like all the good sides of him. And she's like, it's so hard to believe that he did any of the things before, and it was like God just like, look at your dad. Yeah, he should be enough proof that I'm real. And from then on, I was like, okay, well then I'll be the most Christian I can be. I'll follow Jesus with all I got, and it's awesome, still going.
Yeah. So how did you find the bridge?
The bridge. Oh. Yeah. So we had troubles at that church over the years, and the church was changing a lot. It was growing a lot, and kind of we felt like it was missing the point in what church is supposed to be. And there's some like toxic leadership and stuff going on as well. Granted, to give that church credit, I think they've overcome that. Yeah, and you'll find that
like I think even I've heard people talk about the dark days of Northside. There was some like leadership going on here too. So I think it happens to every church at some point.
And like my parents are back there now, and like we have friends there. It seems like they're doing good now, which is awesome. Yeah, praise God for that. But at the time, it wasn't working. A lot of the people I grew up in church with have left that church, and we all kind of left at the same time. And my parents, like I was in 10th grade, I think. My sister, she would have been in college at that point, and even though she was still living in the house, she's like old enough to go venture off and find her own church. I wasn't. I had to still go to whatever church my parents told me to. So they we went to every First Baptist it felt like you could possibly go to in this area, and there was one that it drove me insane. I was like, I do not like this.
Oh my gosh!
Like the first Sunday, it was great, but then the more I got used to it, like
you're like, no.
Again, I'm a kind of weird guy at times, and so our tastes were like there's nothing for me to bond with those other kids on at youth, and we're just very different people, and I felt alone and isolated. And my sister had been venturing off, and she had tried a bunch of different churches, more in like Tifton. I think she tried Cross Point Valdosta at one point.
The warehouse, as I call it.
Yeah. And then she ended up at this church called The Bridge, and it was a church plant in Nashville on the square, and I had never even heard of it. And when you go there that first Sunday, again, it was like a hole-in-the-wall church. Like they had done enough renovation to the building to like make it presentable for people to come in. Yeah. But once you started like looking behind the black curtains of the stage, you're like, oh, there's like a broke down elevator here that like we got caution tape around, and my sister brought me there one Sunday, and I was like, you know what? I might not be able to be here every Sunday, but I'm gonna keep coming to this church because I feel more connected here. And our pastor Robbie, you've met him. Yeah, he's very energetic. Yeah, way too energetic. I feel like I don't know how you must. Well,
it sounds like it's a common trend. Every Pastor Robbie I've met, which is about 3 now, they're energetic in some way.
And I don't know how you are, but I have like a energy cap, and so at a certain point I have to like go back and retreat to my house. And
me too. I'm like it's funny, like it depends on the mood I'm in, or what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, you up here, I need you to be like down here, like know. Now in the morning, I kind of prepare myself. I'm like, all right, Pastor Robbie's gonna get himself psyched up, so I'm just gonna get ready for it. Yeah. But it depends on the person too.
And so Robbie just had so much energy, and the people at that season of The Bridge I mean, they're just raw and real, and they really wanted to follow Jesus, even though, half of us didn't know what that even meant, really. Yep. And I just fell in love with, I guess, the rawness of it. And I that's kind of the thing that I still love about it now is, thankfully, we're like, I don't know, like 12, 15 years into this church plant. Yeah. But the people are still, they're rough around the edges at times, and, we're still learning. Like, you're still having to explain. Like, that's a conversation we just had recently is some of the people still don't know what tithing is or baptism. Wow, yeah.
And they've been there for, what, years now? I mean, or like...
Well, we got a good bit of new people in, and it's just like the same thing of, like, these people are kind of like me and Robbie in that we grew up in church but kind of got a bad taste in our mouth for it, but we didn't want to give up on the church, and the bridge is kind of like the last hope, which may be too much pressure to put on a church, but we really, I don't know, I really love the bridge because of, even though we have a ton of things to work on, you have this desire in people that they're like, it's kind of like a marriage, I feel like, especially like my parents' marriage growing up. My parents got married, they had never really seen a perfect marriage or a good marriage at least, and so they're kind of winging it. And even like raising kids, they're kind of winging it because they didn't really have dads in their lives either. And I feel like that's kind of how the bridge is at times, is it feels kind of like we're winging it, but over the years we've gotten better and better, and we're learning to follow Jesus more and more, and we're just going on that journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, how many people are at the bridge now, you think? Like, roughly? That's a lot, right?
Yeah, I'm terrible with estimating the numbers, and so what looks like, 200 or 300 to me, is probably more like 150. I think that's probably where we're at. We're at like 150 right now, or to 200. Yeah, somewhere in there.
And it'll continue to grow because, I mean, obviously, look at Northside over here. Almost, I think at one point I heard that we had, like, between both services, we had over 1,000 people. And I'm like, what? You had 1,000 people coming out of this building at one morning? Like, that's wild. I could, like, and it's weird to think that, like, I'm just one little person, like, walking around, like,
Yeah, and like 100, like, this is kind of the sweet spot in my mind for a church size of like the 150, 200 mark. Just because I don't think people really know how to relate to each other that well. Still, like, technology ruined that a lot. Which you definitely probably realize that if, like, you get people in here to do podcasts and then they're like, you start having just a normal conversation with them. They're like, why are you asking me questions about myself? Yeah. I feel like a lot of people are struggling with, like, the community and building relationships part. Yeah. And
some of my family was talking about that when they said, like, church has caused them to kind of come out of their shell a little bit. Yeah. Like, they've started, like, joining, like, they've, like, it's my mom. She's been joining the different, like, women's groups and stuff. And just like, I'm having to learn how to communicate because, like, her job, she didn't really have to do that. She was like, maybe on the phone or something, but she did not have to.
I would think that's probably what you guys have as a benefit here at Northside, in that you're a big church. You got a lot going on. You're very busy. But because, like, just walking down to one hall, the amount of classrooms and small groups y'all can have helps to foster that community and build relationships in a way that's realistic. Whereas I feel like some churches, they're trying so hard to be so big that they abandon the small groups because they're just trying to get that one crowd. And
well, you need that.
As long as a church is still doing small groups and stuff like that, then you're able to build that community you're supposed to have. Yeah.
And I've definitely, and not like, and this is not me bragging on myself, but bragging on what God's done with this podcast. Like Noah Jenkins, he told me, he's like, I've learned so much about the people in my church, like just from them talking about their stories. Because like, there's some people that I'm like, they're like, I barely know anybody. Well, everybody's gonna know you. Watch this, and now everybody knows I do this because of the 1 year Pastor Robbie announced it. And I was like, now everybody knows. How many people are going to fix and asking me about this? But, so how did you meet Noah? I know we discussed it before.
How did I meet Noah? Yeah. I met Noah through my wife at our wedding. And I think we said maybe one sentence to him. Yeah. We had the wedding was, it was amazing. But I didn't get to spend as much time, like, talking to people as maybe I would have liked. Granted, we had an amazing dance party afterwards,
Yeah.
so if you missed that, then that's your fault. But we had this thing where we're trying to take pictures with everybody, because everybody wants to take pictures with the bride and groom.
Right. Yeah.
But that's a lot on us.
Yeah. And how many people? There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people there.
I think we tried to aim for 100, and I
Yeah.
think we went over a little because we had to bring chairs out at some point.
Yeah.
Again, if you don't RSVP to a wedding, you're the problem with the wedding.
Yeah.
But we did this like photo bomb thing. I don't remember what it was called. But essentially, the photographer and us ran to each table and took pictures with people. Mm-hmm. And Noah and them's was the last table.
That's funny.
And I think he said something like when we finally got to their table, he was like, "Save the best for last." And I was like, "Yeah."
That sounds. Yeah.
And I think that was all I said to him that
Wow.
night. But we had tried. I think we had tried to get together with him and Kirsten once before that. Mm-hmm. It didn't work out. Met at the wedding, and then I was like, I want to meet Noah.
Yeah.
And usually, if I want to meet somebody, I'm going to.
Exactly.
I annoy them to death till I meet them. And we had them over for dinner.
Yeah.
And I got to know him and Kirsten. I knew Kirsten pretty well. She went to Southside with us. Mm-hmm. But Noah, I got to get to know him pretty well. And then listening to your podcast and then doing the podcast with him, it was like meeting a completely new person all over again. I don't know, you just... Sometimes that's how relationships are, is you hang out with someone once, and you're like, it was all right, it was good. But then it's if you can muster up the energy to do it a second time, people are a little bit more comfortable, and I think that's probably how it was for me and him on that podcast, is like, I fell in love with Noah. I was like, yo, he is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said that. Like, it was like probably, honestly, I was pinching myself, and I was the one that got to work with him for a few months. I was like, me? What are you talking about? But yeah, for real. Like, I mean, and he did, so, and one thing that even my mom has said, 'cause Pastor Robbie gives the preachers the opportunity to preach on Sunday nights, to get them exposed, get on the big stage, and preach. He does, like, it's, his words are so simple, but they're so impactful. Like, the way that he preaches, I just love it. It's like, nailed it. And I actually got, I get it. I'm like, because some people, they can use all these big old giant words, and I'm like, what'd you say? Mm-hmm. And it gets confusing. But he really dives deep and explains it really, really well.
Yeah, I remember feeling this way on the podcast when we recorded it. Was he was very, like, I mean...
Was he nervous?
I don't think he was nervous. He was very knowledgeable in Scripture. Yeah. And I know that's probably should be how most pastors are.
No, but he's really knowledgeable on it.
I got called to the ministry when I was like 14 or 15, something like that. And so ever since then, for the most part, I've hung out with pastors. Like, I had friends outside of that, but spending lots of times with pastors. And there are a lot of pastors who do not know the Bible at all. Yeah. And they're just like good at speaking. Yeah. Noah, though, it was very evident he knows the Bible. He is serious about studying the Word, and I feel like that was something that I was like, okay, that's one of the reasons I love Noah. Yeah. It's just he was serious about his calling. Yeah. And even getting to know him in like his heart a little more. I remember when we had dinner, he said that, I think it's when he said his goal was to become like lead pastor or senior pastor.
Yeah, he's told me that. Yeah.
Me, being the skeptical person I am, immediately was like,
sure about that? Yeah.
Yeah, like, one, it's a hard job, and I don't know if most senior pastors are ready to be a senior pastor. Yeah. But then two, anytime someone's like kind of aiming for the top role, I get skeptical because I've seen just so many people aim for it because of ego or pride, and getting to hear his heart behind it, and his heart was like, yeah, but I'm already looking for the guy to replace me. That was key. That was when I was like, okay, Noah's not someone who's full of ego or pride. He's someone who he's constantly moving forward, and even if he's aiming to be senior pastor, you can bet
he's going to fill that role with somebody else. He's going to make sure
he's already got in mind, this isn't my sole identity. I'm going to find someone else to fill it right after me. And it's going to be that constant passing the baton, constant discipleship.
Yeah. And, we actually did like Pastor Robbie did like part of a sermon. He brought me and a couple kids up on stage one morning, and they actually had a baton and they had us pass it. And I was like, it was so like nerve-wracking because he didn't tell none of us, but we're in a packed pew. Like they're always sitting next to me, and like it's really packed. And he's looking all up. He's like, come on. If we didn't come up the first time, I'm like, what? Or like, but yeah, like honestly, like I can just really see that with Noah, like, what he was doing just to teach me, like, and help me learn like some of the ins and outs, like with anything, like with technology and things like that. It blows my mind, like all the stuff that he does. And I was like, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to come on, just to help him out a little bit, just trying to get some of this like weight off of him, because you're the media specialist, the youth pastor, and you're doing college on top of that. I'm going to help you out when I can, like, because I got a lot more free time. But you just see like his work ethic is so strong, and his heart is like, he's a person you just want to be around, like, and that's why it makes him such a great boss. Like, that's like, but yeah, for real, love Noah, and I know he's gonna love this when he watches it. I'll tell you that much. So what is your role when it comes to like the youth, the bridge? Like, are you the youth pastor? Like, what? What are you considered? Because I know you work with the youth, but
yeah, I have gotten called youth pastor a good bit, and I'm not that.
Yeah.
I teach middle school youth. I don't know why I'm like struggling to think.
No, you're good. You're good.
I teach middle school youth with Katie Marrero and Jeff Marrero when he's able to. He's a cop, so his schedule's kind of crazy. But we tackle middle school youth. Wayne A tackles high school youth. I would much rather him tackle high school youth.
Yeah.
High schoolers are a lot.
Yeah, we're different animals.
Middle schoolers, they just have so much. They're still like new to life.
Yeah. And
they haven't like hit depression yet. And so they I like that. They're like still like very curious and excited about everything. Like you could play a game with toilet paper and they're like, this is the greatest thing in the world. High schoolers, I found that they're starting to hit depression, anxiety.
There's a lot more coming in, yeah.
Yeah, and I do a lot, and so on my 1 hour every Wednesday, I don't really want to get depressed with high schoolers.
Right.
And that's why I let Wayne do that. Wayne is great with them. He's very personable, and he's like, especially the high schoolers at the bridge. He was with them when they were in 6th grade.
Yeah. And
so he's been able to watch them grow up to like senior year. And so he's got a very special bond with them. I'm growing up with these middle schoolers, and we were talking about this morning. It's kind of sad because there's a few who are about to go into the high school class.
It's like,
I've watched them since 6th grade to 8th grade, and I'm about to toss them out, and I don't really want to toss them out. I want to keep them. But I help teach, and really it's just building the relationships with them. I've had moments back and forth over the last like 3 years of me helping with the youth. The first time I came in to help teach, and some kids like confided in me about some stuff, and it was like
interesting. I bet you're like,
it was a lot to take in for me at the time, because I was going through like my dad relapsed, and juggling 2 trauma events was a lot, and so I stepped back. I was kind of burning out too. Took a break for like 6 months, came back, and then Robbie was teaching the middle school class, and he was like at his wit's end. They were driving him insane. They were I'm trying to use church appropriate language. They were heathens.
Yeah.
And it was taking a toll on him. And so then me and the elders and deacons came up with a solution of like, okay, then we'll like pass the baton every week with the middle school ones, and until we can find someone to take over.
Austin here, take it. Yeah.
At a certain point, I feel like I've learned this with ministry. If you take on a role, say like you're teaching youth, that first year may be the worst year of your life. If you can keep on with it and just like manage to go through, you'll eventually adapt to it, and it'll get easier along the way. And that's kind of what happened. Was it gave me, passing the baton with them gave me enough opportunity to build more relationships with those students, and then also to get more in the rhythm of teaching every Wednesday. Even though I've always taught pretty often, teaching every week was an adjustment, because I also work a full-time job. Like I'm like a full-time at the church thing.
Yeah.
And but I got more in the rhythm of it. Told those guys, they can go back to whatever they were doing before.
They were like, "Thank you."
And then Katie, Marrero, Jeff stepped up, and they're like, "We want to help." And the middle school was like a packed house every week, and so we needed more than one leader in there. And we've been passing the baton, me and Katie mostly, and Jeff occasionally, and it's been great.
Different perspectives too for them.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a Bible nerd, and so
no wonder why you and I get along.
Yeah, I always want to like get kind of deeper. I love causing the kids to debate. Like there was one night, and this was like my favorite lesson ever. Asked the question, "Is God fair?" And I threw some passages out there, taught them a little bit of doctrine, and I was like, "You tell me, is he fair?" And the kids were like wrestling with it, because they're like, "Well, he's just, but does just mean fair? Not really.
Yeah.
Fair is everyone gets a piece of the pie. Justice doesn't necessarily mean that." And then you add on Jesus in it, and that completely ruins the whole system. And you have to. There's a lot of stuff we had to go through, but that's more of where I am at. And then Katie she's an actual high school teacher, and she like taught pre-K when she first started. She is able to relate to the students in a different way. She teaches more on like the life application stuff. And then Jeff, he is so great. I've never figured this out because I'm younger than him, so I should probably be able to convey what a teenager is going through better. Yeah. Granted, again, I was a weird teenager, so I didn't experience things the way other people did. Jeff, though, he's really great at tapping into what the kids are going through at that season of their life, and he's able to paint a picture of it and communicate God's truth beautifully. And we were all able to like build off of each other like that. Yeah.
And one thing that when I was thinking about it was like, for us it was kind of different, when Noah came in, because he had all these relationships already built up. So it was like, for him, I think it was a bit easier to come into the role of a youth pastor, but I know it was still like, because we don't have our split. We have middle and high school smashed together. Yeah. And so it's a lot of different personalities in one room every Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's a lot of I know it's got to be tough because middle schoolers and high schoolers think differently. Yeah. Again, like even though they're so close in age, and like in Lanier, like middle school and high school, the schools are actually together. Yeah. So like right down the hall is the middle school from high school. So you think that they would like mesh really easily, but you have to be a very gifted teacher, I think, to be able to convey the truth to both groups at once. Yeah. And I'm not gonna act like I can do that. Like I don't know if I would want to do that.
Yeah, and that's why I'm thankful that Northside does like some of the some of the stuff they do for high schoolers, some middle schoolers, and they split us up sometimes. So it's not as like, oh my gosh, these middle schoolers are getting on my nerves.
Yeah, and the thing that I appreciate about what y'all do here is because Berlin went to y'all's youth group. Yeah. Y'all have a good system where your high schoolers are pouring into your middle schoolers. And I feel like that's really key. We're not quite there yet at the bridge to where we can do that because, again, we're the kids in our high school group are kind of outsiders to the church, so they're not at the place. The middle schoolers that we've been bringing up, though, when they get in high school, I mean, I've already Cole Herring. He's in 8th grade. He's like my right hand man. He great. Will. For sure, teach youth. I mean, he's taught youth once already. I've let him. And I've let him share his testimony from the church. Yeah, he's one of them, and his sister Josie. They're like exceptional kids. They will be leaders in the youth group for sure. Just because part of that's not even like credit to me and Katie and Jeff and Wayne. That's credit to their parents. Their parents have raised them so well and take Bible study series, and it's not even like they had like a perfect home. Like James Herring, their dad, wasn't in church for the longest. Like, he just started coming to church a couple years ago, got saved. But they take their faith so serious that the kids see that, and it shows up every Wednesday night.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that it wasn't that long ago. We had Mikey Gibbons. He just he preached on a Wednesday night for the youth, and then now he's we just commissioned him to go to First Ray City Baptist over there. Okay. He's technically in a way, like, he's not technically the youth pastor. He's kind of in your shoes a little bit. He's not technically the youth pastor, but there's nobody else filling the role in. So I'm like, just in your head, you can kind of say you're the youth pastor because nobody else is filling the role in. And I'm actually going to go over there and do a series over there because he was like, you should come over here and interview some people. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm up for it. But yeah.
Yeah, I just think I'm kind of like everywhere at the bridge.
Yeah,
and so
everywhere, man, everything.
Yeah, whatever anyone need. Like right now,
dude, that's me.
Me and Berlin.
I'll just do about anything.
We're the church photographers. Yeah, apparently.
I saw those good pictures. I see you're taking that's you guys or what?
Yeah, yeah. We're throwing cameras in people's faces every Sunday.
Oh, there's somebody crying. Woo!
Yeah, we're just everywhere. We love serving our church.
Yeah.
I'd learned a while back not to get fixated on the titles.
Yeah.
Because that was a huge idol for me for the longest. And at a certain point, it was like God just asked me, because I felt called to be a pastor at 14.
Yeah.
So I'm 25 now. That's like 10 years of me not being a pastor officially. But
you're working toward it,
Yeah, sort of. That's what Robbie and them say. Is
that's what it starts with.
Their goal is for me to be a pastor. But along the way, I stopped caring so much about the title and was just like, I'm going to do the work whether I have the title or not. And granted, that's when they started giving me, I became a deacon, started a podcast, all these things started opening up.
Yeah.
I think that's key, is don't focus on the title, and you're probably getting the job.
Yeah, I've always said, I think I've said it a couple of times. I've said, my title was the media specialist of some sort. Yeah, okay. Yeah, my media, that was my title, but I did just about anything that they needed me to do for that day. And it was an array of things, whether getting waters or whatever.
Yeah. And the small thing of getting someone a water.
Yeah.
Most people will overlook that and be like, it's just getting a water, it's not important. But
somebody did it.
If you care enough about getting someone your pastor's Robbie.
Yep.
Right before the service, his mouth's getting dry. He's about to go up there and deliver an hour-long message or whatever. And he's going to be passionate. He's going to be screaming.
No, you're not wrong.
If you care enough about him to go out of your way, go grab a water, bring it to him, that shows how much of a caring pastoral heart you have for somebody. It's those little things that add up over time. People start noticing, they're like, no one else is going to get me a water.
Yeah, I was, and it was funny that there was actually a scenario where I almost did that, but as Mrs. Laura went ahead and gave him a water, but it was so funny, he was coughing up a storm, and I was like, I need to go grab this man water from the worship area and run it down to him. I was about to do it too. I was like, because I know that can be miserable up there. You're sitting up there with a bunch of people and you're just coughing up a storm.
Dude, but the other night I spoke at Refuge Church, and I was praying to God I would get some water. I didn't have water that entire night. My mouth by the end was so dry, and I was like, oh gosh, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, and that was me too with the one year I forgot to get water myself, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I spoke for some, I wasn't even the one speaking that much, but I was I guess it was a combination of nerves and all that too. I was like, my mouth is so dry. Give me some water right now. Yep. Yeah, honestly. So, why did you start your podcast, and how did it get its very unique name? Because I like the name.
Okay. Thank you for noticing the name.
Yeah.
I started the podcast begrudgingly. Not really. I had podcast equipment from years and years ago when I tried to start a podcast with my friend.
Yeah.
I think the Instagram account's still up because I accidentally log into it every now and then. It's called Titles Aren't That Important, Mom.
Nice.
I didn't come up with the name. My buddy Jacob Bennett did. And the goal of that podcast is not too far off from what Into the Fray became. Mm-hmm. The goal was Jacob. He's not a Christian. He kind of, I don't know what he believes. I'm his he's one of my best friends, and I couldn't tell you what the guy believes because he's kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do a podcast showing how much people who are different have in common, and how much their values aren't too far off from each other. Mm-hmm. Just because there's so much hate in the culture at the time, and people are like dividing up, and we're able to hang out like all the time, and yet we believe very differently than each other. And so we want to start this podcast. I bought a ton of equipment. We recorded a couple episodes. I think I edited a couple, and then we never aired it.
What? Oh my gosh.
And that was just because me and him like ended up not being, I don't think, on quite the same page about what the podcast was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And so we even had a guest come.
Oh, shoot.
This was when I lived with my parents. Like, we turned my entire bedroom into a studio and had a guest come over and recorded like a 2-hour-long podcast.
Man, I'll take them to dinner after that. Like, sorry, that's not going to air.
Yeah, the dude hung out like at our house the entire rest of the day. Like, I was like, okay, I guess he doesn't want to leave.
Yeah.
But that was the goal of that podcast. I had the equipment kind of just stored in my closet for years, and I had a 2-year span where I wasn't at the bridge. Mm-hmm. I went to like a backwoods church. When I finally came back to the bridge, I was getting plugged back in. I was like, hey, I got this equipment to do a podcast. I don't really want to do one, but I think it'd be a good idea if someone at like the church, if they eventually want to start one, here's free equipment. Yeah. I don't even want money for it. I just want to get it out of my closet and be done with it. My buddy Chase was in that group chat, and he was like, yeah, Austin, that'd be a great idea. You should definitely start a podcast. And I was like, no, I don't want to start a podcast. This is just free equipment if y'all ever want to like use it. Because our church was like more technologically up to date than the church I came from. Mm-hmm. So it made more sense to give it to the bridge.
Right.
And then like maybe 6 months or a year later, Robbie reached out to me. He's like, hey, dude, I know you wanted to start a podcast. Do you like? Again, I was like, to be clear,
that's funny.
For the bajillionth time, I do not want to start the podcast. But he wanted to have a meeting about what a podcast could look like. And I was like, I can help you like plan it out, envision it, and all that stuff to get it off the ground. I'll edit it for you even, but I don't want to be the guy on it. Somehow I ended up being the guy on it, and me and Robbie, we kind of again had that same goal. Me and Robbie, we have the same heart, but we have like different methodologies. I think we have some different like doctrinal beliefs, and so we wanted to shine a light on topics that people were getting divided over, because like the division got worse than from the first podcast I tried to start.
Yeah.
And it was getting like creeping into the church, and so we were like, let's tackle the topics no one wants to talk about, and let's kind of enter into the fray. Into the Fray came from he's a rapper called Propaganda from Humble Beast, and he had this line in his Crooked album, and it goes like, let me step into the fray like I've got something to say. And I love that line. How he says it is just like beautiful, and like creaks in my voice every now and in my head every now and then.
Yeah.
I was like, I really like the Into the Fray, like, you know, like step into it. And so I like looked it up because I was like, I don't even know what fray means.
Yeah. Fray
just means like the tense, uncomfortable areas in life, and that's what we wanted to do. Is we felt like Christians were a lot of. It seemed like very scared to engage in conversations with people who believe differently than them, or whether it's like political or social, whatever it is, even doctrinal, like Baptist talking to a Methodist, or Calvinists and Arminians. Like, it seemed like Christians were too scared to actually like approach those conversations as like, and just have a normal conversation with somebody. Like, just be curious and like ask people what they believe and like get to know them better. And so that was the initial goal of the podcast, was to, me and Robbie, step into the lives and minds of the people at the bridge and get into those conversations. Whether it was, I think the early episodes were like technology and singleness, and you know, this last year we kind of got into politics a little more. Robbie hated that so much.
Did he?
It's not a fun conversation to have,
No.
even though we got a good response from it of like people who I know who are like, they have a stake in the ground of like, they're very political and they love their tribe. They appreciated that we didn't demonize anybody. And then even the episode I recorded like right after the like 2 politics episode series, I had my buddy Jacob Bennett on from the previous podcast I tried to start, and let him share his political views.
How'd that go?
Me knowing Jacob, like, this is every day for me. Like,
Yeah.
I love Jacob. He's a great guy. He has a good heart, but I knew church people, they can tend to demonize people who don't fit into their box. And I was like, I'm gonna like give Jacob a chance to speak to our church. Like, what do you see as someone who's on the outside? He's been to the bridge many times, and he had some critiques and stuff like that. And I feel like I found value in it. And people who, like my buddy, I won't say his name, but me and him got coffee a few weeks after that episode aired, and he's like, dude, I was I'm trying not to use specific language.
He was fuming?
Yeah, he was fuming.
Yeah.
Great word. He was fuming over that episode. He's like, the entire time I'm driving, every 2 minutes, I'm like,
No,
yeah, like
this is wrong.
raging and railing, and he's just angry at what Jacob was saying, and he's like, but that's what I needed to hear. Is I needed to, like, it's a discipline to listen to somebody and not speak, and especially to listen to somebody you disagree with and not speak. And that was kind of the goal of the podcast. Is like, I don't know if people realize how much Christians actually speak. We have a Sunday morning tradition, every church, where one of our best guys gets up and delivers an hour-long message. The world doesn't have that. Like, they have movies and TV show, all that stuff, and music. But that's like, it's really small in comparison to how many sermons are out there, and especially because of the history of the church. And I think that's just a crazy thing to kind of push the church to do more so, is just encourage them to listen to the world. The world's probably not going to listen to us because, granted, there's no reason for them to. But if we can extend our arm out first and be like, hey, we're willing to listen to you. Like, what is your views? What are you actually thinking? What do you actually believe? And let me not try to demonize or like characterize them or caricature them.
Yeah.
Let me actually get to know you as a person. You'll be surprised at how genuinely like loving and kind these people are, but also how much you probably have in common with them and you don't even realize it. Like me and Jacob, we disagree about, whether it's sexuality and marriage and even some politics, but there was so much that we also agreed on politics. And I felt like that was something that people, if you buy into the culture war mentality of like, you got your Fox News versus CNN and like Republican versus Democrat, you can buy into the stereotypes of both of those camps. But if you actually get to know people who are on both of those camps,
you agree with a lot more stuff than you think.
Yeah, like your everyday Democrat isn't the type of person on CNN.
Nope.
They're actually probably way like more level-headed than you believe. And same with a Republican of like, they're not the stereotype of like what's on Fox News. It's, I feel like the goal of the podcast is like best summed up with the 2 conversations I have with people outside of the podcast. There are 2 people from our church. One was a black guy. He's a veteran. And he said something along the lines of, to me once when we were getting coffee, he struggles to love his country even though he fought for it and was willing to die for it, because he doesn't feel like his country loves him back. And that was heartbreaking because like he's someone who really sacrificed a lot to go to war. Same time I'm having this conversation with him, The next day, I'm getting coffee with a guy who was a former cop, and he has like the Blue Lives Matter bracelet on. And these guys sit together every Sunday morning. They love each other. They vote very differently. Granted, I don't even know if they know how differently they vote, but I do. And I think that's the beautiful part is like the church, even local church, like there's such a mix of people who, I don't know, there's beauty in it if you get to know it.
Yeah. That
diversity.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So I hope I don't have this wrong. I believe I'm right on this. How does it feel that you're becoming a father?
Man, could you imagine if you were wrong?
That's I was like, I got to do my research. I was like, I believe he said that I was.
Yeah, you're right. I can't spell my daughter's name right, too.
That's right, yeah.
It's incredible. My main goal in life, besides being like a pastor or anything like that, was always have a family, and Berlin is like the most amazing person I know. She's like genuinely my best friend. We do everything together, as you can tell, because she's here with me right now. She's just incredible, and the fact that we get to have a little version of us is incredible too.
Yeah.
It's made me think a lot about my dad, because my dad was a father to me, even though he didn't have a father really, like a good father figure. And so he had to learn as he went. But despite whatever failings he had, I have so much appreciation for him because he tried. And over the years, he's got so much, like my dad says, I love you now.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah.
You're like,
when I was a kid, that wasn't happening.
You're right. Yeah, it's like, that was.
So the fact that like in the last couple years, we in our phone calls, I love you, son. I love you, father. Like that is incredible. And
there's so much growth there, yeah. Just in that, yeah.
The fact that now like I get to take the things I learned from my dad about being a father, and even from my mom about how to be a parent, and give that to my Berlin's kid is just an incredible thought. And then two, I really like childhood, like the mentality of it, because there's so much youth and excitement and adventure. And so my favorite like story is Peter Pan. The kids in our youth group think I have a little bit of an unhealthy obsession with it. But what I love about Peter Pan is just like he's a kid in the woods, just like everything's exciting, and he's going around having all these fun adventures. Even though in the actual book he's kind of he's a terrible person. Yeah, like he's abusive and all stuff. But that's how a lot of kids are.
Well, that's how the book was. Disney rewrote the whole thing.
Yeah, they in the movie version at least, he's very like fun. Yeah, and I feel like that's just how kids are. Even in the book, like he's a little bit abusive, but again, kids as a kid, like when you're a child, you don't understand what abuse is. You don't understand that when you hit your friend, how bad that is until someone's like, hey, stop hitting your friend. You're not supposed to do that.
So what do you mean? You did that to me last week. No, again.
Yeah, but kids have so much curiosity, and I really like the thought of having a kid.
And you'll get to see life again through somebody else's eyes.
That's who I look forward to, I think, the most, is because as you get older, life is kind of like what Ecclesiastes says, like life kind of wears down on you. Yeah. Whether you intend it to or not, it's just the longer you live, the more you experience pain and trauma, and I mean, you hopefully experience some victory, but a lot of it's going to be life wearing down on you. And so what I think God does is he gives us kids to remind us, hey, don't let that stuff weigh way too heavily on you. Learn to like move forward and find the excitement. And when you're a kid and you break your leg, it hurts, but you're also like, I got a cool story to tell at school. And I think that's probably what we can learn from kids, like especially when me and Berlin have a kid, like we're having Adeline, is when life gets hard on me and Berlin, we'll be able to look at our little girl and she's gonna be like, yeah, but like, who cares if we can't pay rent? Yeah. Like, it's, I don't know, kids just give you a different perspective on the bad things in life, because you don't understand like the full effect that like when I was a kid, my dad lost his job during the '08 crisis. Mm-hmm. And so we were pretty poor. Me during that time,
you were like, no, whatever.
I didn't know the difference. I was like, yo, we have a house over our head, like a roof over our heads. I have all the toys I still want. Like, life's pretty good. Even though my dad is like going from job to job trying to find like some work out there in like the worst financial crisis. And I
guess, I mean, maybe, and I don't know if it's just like because you were young and just didn't notice it, but it was good on him for like not showing it. Like, so you still like were like,
yeah, that I do love that about my parents is that they did not really like the thing that I find is funny is we had our version of pizza back then. We didn't even get frozen pizza.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me.
Yeah, we got pieces of bread, put pizza sauce on it and cheese, put it in the oven. That's pizza.
Hey.
As a kid, greatest thing in the world. As an adult, retrying that is the most disgusting thing ever.
And you're like, why did I eat so much of that?
Yeah. But that's just like the beauty of a kid's mind. And that's, I think it reminds me a lot of when Jesus says, have be like these little children and you'll enter the kingdom of heaven or something like that. Kids genuinely believe their dad can do anything.
Yep.
And we need to have that view of God of like he not only do we believe he can do anything, but he's not like our earthly dad. Our earthly dad honestly can't do everything. Like we think he's Superman, he's really not. He's gonna like fall apart. But your heavenly Father, he genuinely is Superman, and even better than that. And like have that faith and look through life through that.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
So when it comes to our youth today, do you see hope? Or are you worried about the future?
Oh, I see tons of hope.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I think, man, I remember when I was in high school and in youth, I hated when people were like down on us.
Yeah.
Because I was like, man, give us
a chance here.
Yeah, give us a chance. Also, y'all weren't that great either.
It's like, you're the one that racist. Hey.
Yeah. But I think, especially me spending time with kids like Cole or Archer, or I'm kind of blanking on the other kids' names in our youth group.
Wow. I'm joking. It's
we know who the favorite is. Spending time with them constantly, you really see how much love for God they have, how much curiosity they have. I think we're just in a new age, and so that's what scares people a lot of time about the youth is they're like, oh my gosh, these kids are like crazy. And reality is they're no crazy as any other generation. It's just whatever you grew up with, you think is normal. So, like, I mean, that's how adult, like, your grandparents are, is whatever technology they had when they were a kid, they think that was, like, prime technology. And they're like, why do y'all keep, like, messing up the stuff? And you're like, yeah, like, for us, we see a Nintendo Switch, and we're like, dude, this is the best Nintendo there's been.
Yeah.
It can do so much more. And one day when we have great grandkids, our grandkids are going to look back and be like, the Nintendo Switch was kind of bad. Kind of lame. The graphics were kind of trash. And we're going to be like, what? Are you serious?
Some people are already saying that now.
Yeah. And I don't know why I'm plugging a Nintendo Switch. I don't even play it that much. But whatever you is like your generation of life and like the prime of it, that's what you think is normal and that's the best, and you want to get back to that. A lot of that's, I think, nostalgia. I think, again, that's kind of what Ecclesiastes gets at is, he's looking at the next generation after him, and he's like, why even? Like, they're going to squander my property. I worked so hard for all this, and they're just going to throw it away. And he's like, what's the point of that? Well, the point is not to take that mindset on as an adult. The lesson from Ecclesiastes is don't look at life like that. Like, yeah, seasons come and go, and things are going to change. And so, like, don't put all your hope and identity in these temporal things. But also don't look at the younger generation and think they're going to squander my property. Because if you think that, you got to ask the question, why are they squandering the property? And it's because everybody just repeats whatever they learned from the last generation. The whole idea of Christianity and discipleship is Jesus taught a few disciples how to live life. They then pass that on to the next disciples, and on it goes to You and Noah, and me and Kobe. I learned how to do life by watching Kobe. You learn how to do life by watching Noah. The next generations, whether it's hopeful or not, it's going to be based on how we pour into them. Mm-hmm. And if we do a bad job of pouring into them, then yeah, we got something to worry about. Yeah. But if we give them the tools to, take over the world, then they'll take over the world.
World domination. Take over the world.
That's what we're after.
Yeah. So if somebody came up to you today, a young person came up to you today and said, I'm struggling to navigate this world in a biblical way, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
Dang, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I love this. I've never been asked that. How to navigate the world in a biblical way?
Yep. With all the stuff going on that we got, social media and all that. Like, if a kid at the bridge asked you, like, I'm struggling right now, with, like, going to school, things like that, what would you tell them? Like, because there's all this temptation and all that.
My immediate reaction, and granted, I would, in an actual conversation, I'd probably ask a ton more questions. Yeah. But immediate reaction, get out of your head. What I've learned from, nerding out about the Bible for years and years is too often we're thinking the way we look at the world from a biblical worldview is we got to, like, go to our football games and think Philippians 4:13. That's not biblical worldview. That is you cherry-picking scripture and taking it out of context. What actually taking a biblical worldview means is you don't pay attention to how the world's telling you to view things right now and, like, the worldly perspective or even your own perspective, because you got to deal with your own flesh. It's to bury yourself into scripture so much and not, like, you just go to Leviticus and just randomly read the entire book all day and all night, but rather meditating in the Bible, and especially in the Psalms. It means to wrestle with, ask questions, like, debate it. The way you take on biblical worldview is you read the Bible and you wrestle with it. You bring the questions that you have about life to it, and you're like, how did the people in the Bible view their world? And there's a lot more similarities to how that can, like, transfer to our world. The thing I love the most, like, my favorite book is Genesis, and Daniel too. That's pretty good.
How about the whole Bible?
Yeah, the whole Bible. It's so great.
Yeah.
Except Leviticus. No. I'm kidding. But Genesis, a lot of it, the more you dive into, like, the scholarship behind it and the historicity, is the stories are very similar to, like, Middle Eastern stories. So, and as a kid, like, I heard that in high school, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, we're in danger. Atheists know more than me.
I'm in danger. Yeah.
Reality is, the more you dive into it, and that's why I would recommend, like, the Bible Project. It'll help you uncover, like, how the Bible actually works. The question they're asking in Genesis 1 isn't how the earth was made. The question it's asking is, what is your purpose? Of people in the ancient context, they weren't thinking in science in the way we think of science. Their science was very different. Their science was, like, observation. Ours is, like, testing and creating all these, like, new measurements and stuff like that, and way above my pay grade to even explain. Their question, like, the questions they were asking had more to, like, they had to take for granted that the world was here. They didn't have an amazing telescope to, like, understand, hey, there's Mars out there. They just could look up in the sky and be like, there's lights and there's, I won't call that a moon, and they just took that. And they're like, okay, this is what we got. So why am I here? Yeah. And I think that's probably the questions we should be asking way more so. Isn't how did we get here? The Bible could care less about that. It's asking, why are you here, Noah? Of what is your purpose? Which is what, from right, a lot of teenagers are struggling with right now, and even, like, millennials. Of we're struggling with our identity, and so we're going to worldly things and cultural, places to find out where we can get some type of identity. Right. But the Bible's like, nah, your identity's in the image of God.
Nice. Well, that's the last question I got. If you have any final thoughts, or maybe tell people where they can find you, like your podcast at.
Yeah, find me on Instagram at Austin Neil Gregory. Into the Fray Pod on Instagram.
Yep.
Also, this is an amazing podcast. It's the #1 podcast in the world, above Impulsive, and Joe Rogan wishes he could be Noah. I don't think I got anything else.
You mean Charlie, right?
Yeah, Charlie.
Bro,
Not
you're
Noah.
good.
No one wants to be Noah. Gosh, they want to be
good.
Charlie.
Yeah, that's right. All right, good job, and thank you so much for your time. With another episode of the Young Minds Podcast coming to a close, I just want to remind you that you are never alone and faith is action. So let's get out there.